Today I'm reviewing another book by the publisher New in Chess, and the subject of my review today is Improve Your Chess Pattern Recognition, Key Moves and Motifs in the Middle Game by a Dutch international master, Arthur van de Oudeweetering. So this book is it's around 300 pages long and it costs $26.95 or €22.95. So you get a lot for your money. Okay, so what's this about? Pattern recognition. Well, we know in chess that recognizing key motifs and these patterns is incredibly important, and often it's the speed one sees these motifs which is really crucial in a practical game. So this book is divided into 40 different chapters. As the author himself says, it's not a scientific book, it's not a comprehensive book, but these are 40 motifs that he's recognized and discusses and develops. Each of these 40 chapters I should say, is quite short, which I like. You know, he doesn't go into massive depth with analysis. This is more about discussing ideas and how viable they are. He's not bombarding you with computer analysis at all. So, okay, well, let me give you an example of the kind of motifs that he's discussing. Well, first of all, you might like to have a look at this position and think, how do you play with white? And, well, let me give you another position. You can always pause the video to think about how you'd like to play here. And this one is also white to play. If you want to pause the video and have a look at this position, please do, and let me give you a third position as well. So this position, and once again white to play. Okay, well, let's go back to that first position and have a little look at what happened. So this is from a chapter called A Killer Knight. Typical kind of e4, e5 position. A4, well, this isn't exactly the motif that he's discussing, but of course it's a very typical move in these kind of positions. Also a good motif to know about, where white just attacks this pawn on b5. So black deals with that by playing the bishop here, and now white plays the knight into g3. And that knight heads for this wonderful outpost on f5. And this was the prelude to a very nice attack. And this chapter deals with and discusses the knight on f5, or in some cases a black knight coming into f4 as well. It's not really possible in this position. So, you know, that's typical of the kind of idea that's discussed here. I mean, this is quite a simple one. I think many of us know this idea to bring the knight into f5. But, well, I say simple, but he develops the examples. So here, for example, you know, if you have this in your mind about bringing a knight to this key square f5, well, I can imagine that in a game after this check, I might play knight e4, which is a pretty safe move, and certainly white has some kind of positional advantage here, but it's maybe not so clear. But in the game, white actually played e4. Well, this turned out to be a very clever idea, and if we bear in mind this killer knight coming to f5, you can... Well, let's just see what happened. Okay, all these are pretty normal moves so far, and now this very important move. Well, of course, that looks at this weak pawn on d6, but there's more to it than that. In fact, white begins the transfer of this knight to f5, and I think this is a very good example. It just shows that once that knight reaches this key square, often black's king gets in such trouble. Okay, watch out for something nasty happening on f2, but finally the knight reaches its destination, and it's incredible how quickly black's position just collapses after that, particularly once the queen enters into the position, and white won very shortly after. But how many of us in this position would actually think of playing e4 with this maneuver in mind? But maybe once one appreciates the knight is strong coming to f5. Maybe one would. Okay, let's look at another position. So this one, again, this one isn't too difficult, but this is typical of the way that the author discusses these motifs. He often gives some simple examples and then develops them with a few more examples that are perhaps more complex. So here, typical French defence position, and white now played knight g5. So this was the key motif in this chapter. So clearly taking will lead to, well, a terrible attack, a winning attack for white in this position. Perhaps throwing in a check first before actually recapturing. Well, let's just see that. I think I would probably throw in bishop h7 and then queen h5 and open up the h file. But after knight g5, well, black counterattacked. But anyway, white's attack is incredibly strong, and this game shows how white built up the attack very, very nicely. Let me just go on a couple of moves, because when you play the pawn to h4, of course, well, you're not guaranteed to open the h file, but it does mean the rook can come up and swing into the attack on one of these squares as well. And well, in this case, Chandler won a very nice game. But he goes on to discuss, for example, this position. And white tried a similar idea. He also played knight g5 here, and after the knight was attacked, then defended it with h4, and the h-file, well, black certainly can't take that, or would be ill-advised to take the knight. But in this case, he shows that actually this maneuver really wasn't appropriate, because actually white can't follow it up very well. So in this case, black succeeded in exchanging off this important light-squared bishop, and actually began his own counterattack on the queen side, and actually black won very simply. In fact, his king is not in danger. It's not possible to disturb the knight from f6, and in this case moving the knight to g5 just wasn't appropriate. So I think this is important. One, recognizing that a motif is possible, but two, assessing whether it's any good or not, and I think this the author does very well. As I said, these chapters are quite short, and I like that. He doesn't go over the top, but just gives you something to think about. Now let's have another look at this position I mentioned earlier. Hopefully you've had a little time to digest this one. This is perhaps a motif which isn't so well known, and that's what I like about this. He talks about ideas that we've probably seen already and discusses them, but also there are a lot of ideas in there which I'd sort of seen but hadn't really crystallized in my head, but he does that extremely well. This is a great example. It's from a game by Smyslov from 1964. Smyslov, I mean, what world champion, what can I say, just a master of strategy. Here, rather surprisingly to my eyes at first glance, he played bishop d2, and the subject of this chapter is about retreating bishops back into the box, but sometimes how strong it can be. Well, why did Smyslov play bishop d2? Well, he wants actually to bring this bishop perhaps to influence the queen side by playing e3, but e3 immediately means that bishop can be exchanged off. It's not so good. Also, if you try to open up the position for this bishop, well, actually black can put up a decent defense by blockading on d5. Yeah, should be fine for black. So what Smyslov did was to play bishop d2, and his whole idea is to play e3 and then to drop the bishop back to b5 and suddenly to start play on the queen side, and actually white's bishops, even the one on d2 which is blocked in, play a very important role. In fact, in this case, black did not react very well. He played the knight back to e8, and actually Smyslov, now it's appropriate to break open the position with e4, and well, Smyslov won a very, very nice game just simply by attacking the queen side here. In fact, this game, this maneuver, has a very important precedent. If you know your chess history, Yanovsky against Capablanca, very famous game, where Capablanca with the black pieces here played bishop d7, and his whole idea again was to begin play on the queen side. It's slightly different to the Smyslov game, but very important that that bishop comes back here to control these important squares, and Capablanca succeeded in seizing the initiative on the queen side with b5 and then knight c4, and well, he won a model game. Maybe white could have defended better, but it was a very nice idea, and the Smyslov idea is rather similar. So who is this book aimed at? Well, I would say it's squarely aimed at the club player, I mean I got something out of it as well. I enjoyed the discussions, and you know, there were some ideas which were developed and lots of positions I hadn't seen before. But really it's aimed at the club player, because you're not bombarded with analysis. It's explained with words rather than you know, analysis of many variations, and he doesn't kind of go over the top with his chapters. You know, as I said, there are 40 chapters and they're pretty short. There are loads of diagrams, which I like. So this is the kind of book you can read on the train. You don't have to have a chess set. A chess set would help, but you know, you can pick up these ideas very, very quickly. I should also say there are exercises as well. So you know, at the end of the book is divided into 40 chapters, but 4 parts, and at the end of each of the 4 parts, there are exercises to look at, which hopefully will reinforce the ideas discussed. Nice book. It's nicely laid out, nice paper, good quality. So there we go. Improve your chess pattern recognition. Published by New in Chess. Available from newinchess.com. You can buy it online, and it's $26.95 or €22.95. Enjoy.